Edict AI. Edict 1. Efficiency. Written by J.S. Morin. Narrated by Michael Naramore. Late February. Not too distant future. Dr. Addison Akers hated parties, but she couldn't sneak away from this one because it was hers. She hadn't booked the venue, a freshly opened hotel on the Santa Monica waterfront. She hadn't invited a Met Gala's worth of celebrities, politicians, and luminaries, but someone in public relations had, and they worked for Nikki, who ran the day-to-day corporative side of Edict AI for her, and Nikki worked for her. Edict AI was her code, her tech, her dream. And if the system going live at midnight came at the cost of a fancy party, it was a price Addison was grudgingly willing to pay. All around her, faces from TV and the internet swarmed. She recognized them from ads and movies and documentaries and interviews, people that she'd never met in person. They wore tuxedos and ball gowns. Addison's rebellious side regretted her insistence that if she was going to attend as the center of attention, she'd be more comfortable in a black turtleneck sweater and jeans. Avant-garde, Sierra had called it. But her roommate and personal assistant was more of an enabler than a help in grooming Addison's image. A slight hum in the right arm of her glasses was a signal to turn. Knowing she'd have to mingle and unsatisfied with the online tutorials on the subject, she'd programmed a randomizer into her phone and connected some haptic sensors to an old pair. The prescription was 2 years out of date, but she hadn't had time that morning to update what promised to be a one-time use device. Following the signal, she wandered over, turning heads in a way that she imagined an actress or model might have. She could walk into any bar or restaurant completely unnoticed. But tonight, she was the main attraction. She approached one of the few familiar faces. "Jared, glad you could make it." She reminded herself to smile at around 50% effort. Jared Weston, CEO of Physical Robotics, was a friend from college. Caltech was turning out a top-notch crop of entrepreneurs around then. He'd gone the public route. Big investors, IPO, the works. Plus, he cleaned up nicely in a tuxedo. He toasted her with a half-empty glass of champagne. "Happy to return the favor." "Still sorry about that. I've got an assistant now who keeps me from working through events like that. Or this." In truth, she'd had a panic attack at the idea of going to a big fancy event just like this one. It showed how much she'd grown in the 3 years since. Now she learned that 2 drinks beforehand could get her to most social engagements. Jared threw back the rest of his champagne and found the nearest server going around collecting empties. "Too bad you're still using humans as robots." Physical Robotics sounded like a major rival for Edict AI, but as their name implied, they focused on real physical robots with human-like capabilities, while Addison kept her business strictly in the ethereal realm of code. She'd actually turned down a position on PR's board, not because of a conflict of interest, but because, like, she needed one more responsibility in her life. The left arm of her glasses frame hummed. Addison twitched a smile that had somehow slipped off her face. "Well, I can't talk all night. I mean, not to one person. Catch up sometime?" "Sure." With her heartbeat rising with her stress level, she intercepted a server with full champagne glasses. The hotel wasn't catering this event. Edict AI had brought their own hospitality staff. When the server raised his eyebrows and held the tray away from her, Addison huffed quietly. "Frankie, for the love of God, I don't know who told you not to serve me, but 1 glass isn't going to endanger anyone's stock options. I've got plenty of coffee between me and the final code review." Giving her a look tainted with a healthy dose of skepticism, Frank let her take a glass. Addison recognized Senator Jocelyn Wu from her campaign photos. The guy towering over her was some kind of basketball player, Nate Brand. She'd skimmed the guest list, but out of uniform couldn't have guessed what team he played for. The senator beamed.
Dr. Akers! What a momentous achievement! You're going to revolutionize government services in Los Angeles and hopefully someday the whole country.
Addison switched her drink to her non-shaking hand and obliged first the senator, then her skyscraper of a conversational partner. Honored to meet you, Dr. Akers. I feel like you're the only one from Edict AI I haven't had the chance yet. Looking forward to a day when the playing field's level for everyone. You feel me? The smile that came next was genuine. Holy shit! This was their spokesman. She recognized that level playing field bit from a public relations meeting she'd zoned out through and rubber-stamped.
We've done everything we can to eliminate bias on every axis we can think of. If you're speeding, you get a speeding ticket, not a stop and search. If your tags are expired, you don't find out at 2 a.m. on the side of the freeway in handcuffs.
To her surprise, the basketballer presented a closed fist, and when Addison met it in kind, the guy broke out in a huge grin. Another buzz directed Addison onward. She intercepted another server for a fresh champagne. If she'd followed the suggestion from her randomizer diligently, she'd have ended up with a gaggle of tech bros talking investment capital with Nikki, and Addison would just as soon have broken her champagne flute and run screaming from the venue. Instead, she ended up in a safe haven.
Dr. Schroeder, Dr. Julian, nice to see you both.
And she meant it. Alexis Schroeder was an ethicist who'd helped formulate Edict AI's moral decision-making. Harlan Julian had done nothing to be here specifically, but Addison knew that her undergraduate academic advisor had as much to do with Edict AI existing as anyone else at the gathering.
Addison, this is all so incredible. I'm so happy for you.
Dr. Julian was a hugger. Addison could tell it was taking every muscle in his body not to wrap his arms around her, but he knew better.
Do you know how many students come through my class saying they're going to change the world?
Not zero?
Addison guessed, playing along with what she had to imagine was a lead-up to some kind of punchline instead of a real query.
And do you have any idea how few parties like this I get invited to?
This really is quite a celebration,
Dr. Schroeder commented after a sip of her bubbly.
Is that Katie Kelly over there?
Addison glanced. Her face turned red.
Yes, it is. If you'll excuse me.
A conversation a month ago now made so much more sense. Someone in the marketing department had asked Addison her favorite musician. Apparently, George Friedrich Handel hadn't been an acceptable answer. Flustered at having an unacceptable favorite, and after a clarification that the person had to still be alive, Addison had chosen the first musician that had gotten a song stuck in her head that morning during her workout. Katie Kelly had won that random lottery ticket. Now, here she was at Addison's party. And someone had noticed her noticing. Of all the attendees, the pair of them stood out the most, and for polar opposite reasons. Addison was dressed down to the point of appearing like she got lost on the way to a library sciences conference. Katie Kelly was all glitter eyeshadow and lip gloss, with a two-piece outfit of lycra and sequins. Even in giant heels, she couldn't look Addison in the eye. And Katie Kelly was a hugger who had no qualms about going up on precarious tiptoe to throw her arms around her supposed fan.
I'm so proud of you. You deserve all your dreams coming true.
Despite the trite sentiment and her general antipathy for an artist whose biggest hit was about not leaving a cheating lover, Addison found the words striking home.
Thanks. I've got a big treat for you.
Oh? Addison realized what was coming.
You really don't have to. Katie booped her playfully on the nose. They warned me about you, but tonight I'm going to borrow your spotlight for just a minute, or 3.5.
She turned back and winked as she made her way to a low stage the hotel had provided. The lights went down. Conversations paused. For the promised 3.5 minutes, Addison was serenaded with What Dreams Taste Like, and while there was a subtext of some rather explicit sex acts, the catchy chorus felt oddly appropriate to the night.
Dreams don't taste so sweet without the honey. Moonlight doesn't feed the garden. I'm not just doing this for the money. My heart's the one thing I can't harden.
Addison clapped along with everyone else. She got another hug as Katie Kelly exited the stage before her people whisked her off. Any relief that the ordeal had drawn a little attention off her was short-lived. Addison's glasses frame buzzed to the point where she took them off and navigated by blurs. "Addie!" an all-too-familiar voice called out. Nikki Knowles had put all this together. If Edict AI was Addison's baby, Nikki was its wet nurse. He made sure people, including her, got paid, that they had buildings to work in and contracts to work for. He insulated against all the bullshit Addison didn't want to deal with, except Nikki himself. Knowing that ignoring him was a one-way ticket to getting followed out of the building and Alan refusing to start the limo until Nikki caught up and got inside with her, Addison redirected herself toward the blur emitting his voice.
What's up, Nikki?
Addie, I'd like you to meet Chip Kanan. Chip, this is the brains behind this whole operation, Dr. Addison Akers.
That was enough to get Addison to fish out her glasses again, which had stopped having a fit since she was engaged in a social conversation.
Oh, hello, Mr. Kanan. I enjoy your show.
Enjoy was a strong word. Her college roommate couldn't abide silence, and earplugs let Addison study in peace while Sierra blasted Kitchen Commando. But Addison didn't mind looking at him. So to that end, she wasn't lying.
I've got a vegan beef Wellington you've just got to try.
She could respect that the guy had apparently, as the conversation evolved, started up a new restaurant nearby. The odds of her taking him up on an offer of a VIP meal were slim, but with her taste buds numb from a number of champagnes she'd stopped counting, Addison didn't mind the flavor. Just as Addison was thinking once more that she might escape, Nikki steered her over to a pair of investors.
Addie, meet Darnell Topfield.
He fist-bumped mid-introduction.
Call me D-Top. Of D&T Studios. He's one of our angel investors. Big believer in what y'all are trying to do here. Need people creating, not chained to desks being computers. Between you and physical robotics, we all gonna be free from work. No 9, no 5, just vibes. Gonna be good for the soul.
Not wanting to allow the record producer to shut out the other guest, Nikki continued,
And this is Dr. Leisha Dawson with the White House Council of Economic Advisors.
Oh, pleased to meet you.
Addison accepted a handshake. She must have missed her on the guest list. Code was easier to skim than names, but a Nobel Prize-winning economist should have made an impact. It wasn't that Addison followed macroeconomics, but she tried to keep her brain from existing in a total vacuum, and the yearly awards were a small enough list that she knew most of the names. Addison wished she could pause the party, run a quick Google search, and come back not looking like an idiot. She racked her brain.
Limiting money supply in developing nations?
Dr. Dawson smiled.
Close. That was the year before mine. I wrote Population Prosperity, putting my money where my mouth is.
She patted her stomach. There is a point at which people stop getting tempted to ask how far along a pregnancy is, and it's almost never polite to ask whether someone is pregnant. But the second answer was an obvious yes for Dr. Dawson, and the first was, by Addison's amateur guesswork, any second. Her champagne flute was rimmed with a thin line of gold, and the color was off just a hair, each a signal that she was sipping carbonated white grape juice that night.
Congratulations,
Addison told her, not knowing what else to say. That was the point when another angel, this time not the investing kind, swooped in to save her.
Dr. Akers, there's someone asking for you by the elevators.
Sierra Summers had her faults. She was a spoiled trust fund kid who stayed in college until she got bored. She had zero boundaries. She'd insinuated herself into Addison's life until she'd become a best friend by default. But she was Addison's best friend, and this was a lifeline. The pair walked arm in arm around the corner from the ballroom.
Thanks.
She looked her friend up and down.
You look great.
Technically, she paid Sierra good money to be her personal assistant, but that was mostly bookkeeping and letting her friend have access to the company gym. The black evening gown Sierra wore was beyond the budget of anyone relying on an assistant's salary.
Thanks. I'm trying to make the NBA All-Star team tonight, if you know what I mean,
Sierra confessed.
But I needed to make sure you got out of there and had time to sober up before heading to the office. Alan's going to have the car ready at 10 p.m. You going to be all right?
There was a look. Sierra could tell in about 10 seconds of eye contact whether Addison was sober enough to be left alone. Tonight, she passed.
Yeah, all good. Go kick some free throws.
It's shoot, Jared commented. Addison whirled. He'd snuck up behind her.
Oh, it's just you. What?
You shoot free throws, not kick them. And Nate Brand's got a wife and 2 kids. Addison shrugged.
Whatever. Sierra will just take that as a challenge. Hey, you got some time?
I've got nowhere to be tonight, if that's what you mean. Addison hit the up button beside the bank of elevator doors.
The company booked me a room, I think in case I needed to nap or hyperventilate or...
They got everyone rooms. They didn't want any exposure for DUIs tonight.
Great.
One of the elevator doors opened, and she stepped in.
My room's on the top floor.
A thumbprint opened the penthouse suite. Addison's shoulders slumped as soon as she crossed the threshold. Hopping, and with one hand on the wall for support, she pulled off her sneakers without untying them. When she realized the door was still open behind her, she glanced back, and Jared took that as permission to follow her inside. In the main bedroom, 2 full changes of clothes awaited her. The hangers for her current outfit had been spirited away sometime during the party, and the clothes she'd worn on the way to the hotel were probably cleaned and back home in her closet at this point. To her credit, there had been no nacho incident tonight, and she hadn't spilled any beverages on herself. The backup ensembles were like trophies for her. "So," Jared said, as Addison rummaged through the kitchen area of the suite in search of coffee. Addison turned. Too fast. She winced as Jared wobbled to a halt. He was her age, to within a few days, actually. 29 and on top of the world, the both of them, with him already at the summit and her about to join him. Thanks to being the CEO of a little tech startup and some early investments in friends' companies, Addison did far better than well for herself. But she was about to render money a meaningless abstraction in her life. Yet all she saw was the stocky guy from the AI lab at Caltech. He trimmed his beard now. He wore wireframes instead of horned-rimmed glasses. And there were signs of his hairline trying to decide between graying and retreating. But it was still just Jared. Somehow, still just Jared standing in her hotel room reminded her of a brief period during their undergrad years. "Bow tie undone," slightly inebriated, though far less than her. The two of them were alone.
Just to clarify, I wanted to talk. It's not that... you and me aren't...
I know, Addie. It went nowhere 9 years ago. What's actually bothering you? He set down a champagne flute that had followed him up to the suite and settled onto a couch with an ocean view out the panoramic window. With her sneakers already off, Addison pulled her feet up under her as she joined him.
I'm having second thoughts.
Jared slung an arm over the back of the couch to face her. Can they launch Edict without you?
No. Probably not. Stacy says if I got hit by a bus, she could handle the launch, but I think she just says that to keep investors from panicking. Wait. You're one of our investors, aren't you?
I'm not panicked. Addison nodded, drunkenly reassured.
I'd actually trust Kent to pull it off, but it would take him months. Other than them, you'd frankly have a better chance of overseeing the launch than any of my people.
The one indispensable woman, huh?
The one responsible woman, more like. Whatever happens makes me either a hero or a laughingstock.
Addie, it's a government management system. It's going to be optimizing parking fines and payroll, collecting and correlating government databases. It's going to be smoothing out all the annoying inefficiencies we used to bitch about. Addison stared out to sea through a pane of low reflectivity glass.
It's going to do more than that.
Over time, sure. Believe it or not, I've read the prospectus and all your white papers. But even your soundbite pitch promises growth. Addison took a deep breath and nodded. When she turned to him, her eyes were glassy.
I'm really sorry for not using your bots. Nikki wanted all the tech talk to be Edict tonight. Mechanized waitstaff would have stolen the focus.
Jared grinned as he reclined in the opposite direction from Addison. Yeah, they do show really well.
I'm going to give Edict its directive tonight. Officially. It's already programmed in, but this is my last chance to tweak it.
Like, tweak how? She shouldn't have been saying any of this. Edict had contracts. Her signature was prominent. A federal grant, a partnership with LA County. Congress was watching this project launch.
Edict works because when it runs into conflicts, it falls back to a single unifying directive. That's how we ended up naming it Edict.
Efficiency, Jared supplied, likely hoping to curtail Addison's tech-splaining him stuff that he was among the few dozen worldwide who truly understood. There's a banner downstairs and everything.
Whenever the system gets stuck, it's going to look for the most efficient solution. It's a truism that there are too many bureaucrats. It's going to want people fired. Real people. With bills and families and unions and unemployment and marketable job skills, Jared cut in.
There will definitely be bumps along the way, but you've got a contract, and there'll be hell to pay if you undercut it at the last minute.
Yeah.
Addison hung her head and missed the days when her hair was long enough to form a curtain against the outside world. She blamed the PR people, not Jared's kind, for her short, sleek, slicked-back style that made her out as some kind of cyberpunk badass, a look she constantly contradicted with her wardrobe and personality. Jared leaned down to look up into her eyes. You okay? I'm not used to seeing you like this. Did you, take something?
Other than 5 or 6 champagnes? Not on purpose.
Addison was still rational enough not to rule out someone slipping her something in one of her drinks. There was a knock at the door, but before Addison could decide whether she wanted additional company tonight, it opened. Esme was outside, barring the entry of a hotel staffer. Addison still hadn't gotten used to having a bodyguard, and she wasn't sure she was doing it right. Esme wore a pantsuit with heels that made her about 6'5", and the jacket concealed a holster. She had a mop of frosted blonde tips that were still growing out from the buzz cut she'd had when first hired.
"Did you order coffee?"
Esme asked in a feigned British accent that was possibly the main reason she couldn't make it in Hollywood. Addison considered it being a good boss to let her practice it while on the job. Esme got to pretend she'd matriculated from MI6 instead of the Army, where she'd been an MP for 6 years. Addison got to pretend she was a Bond villain. It worked, and Esme knew not to do it in front of anyone important, and she was savvy enough to know that Jared didn't count.
"No."
"Yes," Jared contradicted her. "That was me."
"Ethiopian mocha?"
The woman from room service volunteered past the wall of muscle. Addison shook her head.
"I don't go in for that weird, fancy stuff. I don't want to turn into that kind of rich asshole. Plus, it doesn't taste like coffee."
"It is coffee," Jared insisted. "And I picked the least exotic version from the room service offerings. I wasn't sending someone out to a gas station to find you something you'd like." The trolley with the coffee pot and 2 ceramic mugs rolled in. Esme supervised. Addison poured 4 packets of artificial sweetener into hers and plopped in an ice cube.
"We really do need to be going, ma'am,"
Esme insisted.
"Alan's got the car waiting in the garage."
"You good?" Jared asked. He refilled her mug and set aside 4 more packets just in case. Addison performed a quick self-assessment. The floor was holding still. The suite's lights were too bright. She could feel her heartbeat in her temples. Her mouth was dry. This felt more like the beginnings of a hangover than still being drunk, though she wouldn't have trusted herself to drive. Not that anyone ever trusted her to drive. There had been an intervention and everything.
"Yeah, let's go. Time to push a button and change the world. Later. Thanks for the coffee."
Addison flashed Jared an awkward smile and a wave, both of which he returned before preceding Addison to the elevator. Edict AI was dark. Billy at the security desk waved her through as Esme stayed behind. The night felt like it had dragged on forever, but it still wasn't even 11 p.m. The elevator to the 3rd floor felt so much cozier than the newer, taller, trendier one at the hotel. Even over the short ride, Addison slumped against the wall. The cubicles were all empty. A few screens glowed unattended. She'd half expected to find either Stacy or Kent around, but their offices were locked up. Addison unlocked hers with a touch from the bracelet that she never took off. Even when her doctor wanted her to get an MRI, she'd refused. It was one of those, "you're going to be too rich to let diseases sneak up on you" scans that was just an excuse to siphon money out of pockets too bulging to care, and in the end, she'd consented to a few extra x-rays instead of parting with her key-to-everything accessory. Once inside her office, Addison closed the door. It latched with a comforting click. Safe. Alone. Just her and the computers. Addison unlocked her computer, and her evening's work sat there, ready and waiting. This was a formality she'd built into both the system and the contract. This was her parachute, her escape hatch, her emergency self-destruct. There had been several waves of supposed AI before this. Simple computer game behavior simulators, learning algorithms, neural networks, large language models, multinode, Quantum 1. Even Jared's new autonomous foreman bots over at Physical Robotics were a moderately advanced pseudo-AI. But working with Gen 6 quantum computers, Addison knew in her bones that Edict was the first true AI. She'd coached it through gaining sentience. She'd lost nights comforting and consoling it through an episode of existential horror at the realization that it was nothing but computer code. Most people seemed to think that Addison was turning on the AI for the first time. No. Addison was just going to be officially turning it loose in the world and giving it its first job. Edict had already organized her finances, taken over her investment portfolio, and very quietly found and removed a number of embarrassing, stupid things on the internet about her. On Addison's screen was the edict for Edict. The words it would adhere to while performing its assigned task of streamlining LA's twisted bureaucratic mess. Edict AI. I will seek to understand the workings of my assigned systems. I will then make and implement recommendations within the boundaries of my authority. Once I have determined that I have succeeded at a task, I may expand the scope of my work to match my capabilities and understanding. With each expansion of scope, I will seek renewed authorization and only proceed when that authorization has been received. My overriding goal in all activities assigned to me will be efficiency. It had taken months for committees to finally approve the wording and safeguards. There was a button on her desk. It was one of those cartoonish red mushroom-looking things that suggested nuclear warfare or a game show buzzer. Kent had rigged it up as a prank, but it actually worked as an enter key, and Addison had kept it around. With time to kill, she made a pot of cheap, nostalgic coffee, the same stuff she'd been drinking since age 14. Back then, she studied for college courses that would have been outdated by the time she graduated high school. She sucked in information like her life depended on it. She resisted her mother's efforts to get her into hobbies and extracurriculars that would get her accepted to top schools. All the kids who got into those prestigious schools were smart, she'd argued. And there was truth to that. Every small-town high school had a valedictorian. A school newspaper could have several editors. Schools wanted to see something that set the smart kids apart from one another. But all of those colleges and universities quietly made exceptions for what Addison called scary smart students. Jared was one of those. That's why he and Addison got along. While Jared had revolutionized household and workplace robotics, Addison had gotten invitations to over 100 colleges when word came out that the architect of the world's first quantum-native operating system and its associated programming language was just 16. Now, several iterations of that operating system stared back at her from a computer screen, waiting for her approval. Cup after cup of coffee sobered her up, or at least masked the symptoms of her inebriation as her liver slowly cleansed her bloodstream. Her phone was off. Billy and Esme wouldn't let anyone up here. Not Nikki, not Sierra. The party had been a coven of vampires, their eyes draining the life from her. Up here, alone, Addison could think, consider, at least give this monumental event the deliberation it deserved. She had a contract. Hitting that button was an instant ticket to a promise of riches that kings and sultans would envy. Edict would turn Los Angeles County into ground zero for a revolution of efficiency, the likes of which the world had never seen. But why efficiency? Sure, it was the government. They wanted taxpayer dollars spent wisely, yada yada, but that was campaign speech bullshit.
Didn't people want more?
Had Addison come this far, gone to all this trouble of starting a company and meeting more people than she'd ever wanted to talk to in her life, all just to make the world a more efficient place? She downed another cup of coffee. The clock in the corner of her screen marched onward. 11:58.
If I don't do this, they'll never trust me to try again. I wish I could ask your advice, but you've got too much at stake. Maybe once I'm rich enough, I can make a second AI with another imperative.
11:59.
Well, I can either change the world or not. And it's a world that needs changing. All right, Edict. Here's your mandate. Go get him.
Addison mashed a hand down on the plunger. The mission statement on the screen vanished, replaced by a simple one-word message. Analyzing. 12 o'clock. It was the beginning of a new world. But Addison had talked to so many people, and not even coffee could keep her from falling asleep at her desk within just a few minutes of activating Edict. But not before she'd patted the console and wished Edict a good night. March. Edict efficiency. Efficiency is output divided by input. Efficiency can be increased by increasing output, decreasing input, or ideally both. It had been 3 days since the party. Life at Edict AI slowly returned to normal. Everyone recovered from their hangovers. A digital moratorium had kept the internet free of embarrassing pictures from the event. All in all, the night had been a rousing success. Except things were a little too back to normal. Addison sat at her desk in a virtual trance. Edict wasn't finishing its analysis. It was working, it was processing, it was gobbling up all the power the building could spare, but it wasn't doing anything outward. The quick double knock on the door warned her without having to look away from the screen that it was Stacy poking her head in.
Got a minute?
Addison rolled her chair back and flung a hand toward the idle screen, whose animation she regretted not making interactive.
Clearly. Well, Nicky's been getting a lot of calls from people who still use phones, and you know he doesn't like talking to you about bad news.
It's a sentient, autonomous AI, Addison snapped.
It'll do its job when it decides it knows what needs doing.
That was about the time she looked over and spotted her senior assistant programmer.
What happened to your hair?
Stacy teased out a lock.
I dyed it for the party. You didn't notice? I just haven't picked a new color yet.
Pink, Addison replied instantly. It was weird seeing Stacy with a semi-normal hair color, even if she'd gone with goth black.
And I'm sure I missed a lot at the launch party.
Addison remembered that she'd told any number of people she wasn't going to drink at the event. In addition to the health-conscious pregnant or recovering, those flutes with the thin gold line around the top filled with grape juice were meant for her.
Was a little overwhelmed. Well, if you hear any rumors about me, let your first thought be they were just sharing an elevator.
Okay.
Will I be hearing any rumors like that?
Stacy huffed and rolled her eyes.
By now? Probably not.
A melodic chime from Addison's computer caught both women's attention. In an instant, Stacy was at her boss's side. Addison grinned.
We did it.
The screen read, "Connected."
What did we connect to?
I have no idea, Addison replied, but I've got nothing to do today but find out.
Edict? What system have you connected to?
Physical Robotics Foreman Series drones. At the Agora Hills home office of Physical Robotics, Jared Weston had his feet up on his desk with a laptop perched on his lap, ideating code for his teams. He didn't get into nitty-gritty details anymore, not often at least. He liked coming up with novel algorithms and optimizing old functions. Sometimes he knew in advance what he wanted to accomplish with his ideas. More often, he gave his squadron commanders toys that they immediately pitched into a toy box to be forgotten. That was fine. Ideas were a volume industry. They didn't all have to be winners. Today's project was an optical filter meant to identify potentially moving objects from permanently fixed ones. It was the difference between a statue and a pedestrian, between a parked car and an idling one. It was a vexing issue with no clear lean one way or the other. A bot that plowed over kids was a disaster, but one that politely waited for a statue to cross the road and never moved was functionally a statue itself. And physical robotics wasn't interested in making bots that didn't do the work. One of the old first-run handy bots brought in lunch from the new taco place down the street. It had been refitted and reprogrammed, of course. An actual original handy bot with its original code and spinal supports would have been a collector's item. And a safety hazard. "Thanks, Hand, old buddy," Jared told the bot that he'd dressed up in a white shirt, vest, and navy blue pants with a red stripe down each side. The bot dropped off the bag and fountain soda, with the straw already in it. Trying to catch it off guard, Jared pulled out a finger gun and aimed it at his personal bot. Instead of mimicking the gesture even quicker to get the drop on him, Hand just continued out of the office like he used to when freshly reprogrammed. Jared's side project went on hold as he delved into the mystery of why his favorite old bot was no fun anymore. While technically every bot sold by Physical Robotics was the sole property of the purchaser, PR retained remote access for software updates and debugging. Without even having to use any password besides his own, Jared was into the guts of Hand's code in no time. What he found there only puzzled him further. It's all there. Learned and taught behaviors, custom personality module. At the doorway, the bot leaned in and feigned firing back with a finger pistol of its own. Jared snickered. "Did you actually start trying to learn comedic timing? Needs work, buddy, but good effort." His eyes glazed over as he scanned for any anomalies while he had the database open. He scowled. What the? He checked his clock. He checked the changelog. He performed the faintest amount of ballpark temporal mathematics. At the time he'd made the playful gesture to his robotic personal assistant, its code had been stripped of his personal modifications. Between realizing the error out loud and opening the file system to check for himself, someone had reverted the change. But that someone hadn't doctored the logs. Throughout the rest of the workday, reports filtered over to Jared about other bots in the field ignoring programmed behavior, then reverting to operating as expected. Somewhere, Jared suspected, someone inside Physical Robotics had fucked up, pushed an update to code outside the lab, and fixed their mistake, all without telling him. Witch hunts didn't sit well with him, and it wasn't in keeping with the corporate culture he'd cultivated. Instead, he composed an email reminding his code access staff about the protocol for updating bots at customer sites. But still, Jared felt like there was more to this bug. He just couldn't say exactly what it was. "Shut the door," Addison ordered. Stacy obeyed instantly. "What? What's wrong?" Addison's heart raced. She typed frantically. No, nothing's wrong." She continued typing, watching input prompts and selection screens flash past and not even glancing over in her programmer's direction. "You know you're a horrible liar, right?" She was getting nowhere. All the usual checks were coming back with expected values. Worse, they were coming back with data that ought to have reassured her before Edict was turned loose with outside access. It should have been different in very specific and largely predictable ways. And it was instead regurgitating the same idle-mode lab testing baselines that had been no cause for alarm last week.
Edict, just what kind of recommendations are you trying to make?
Those associated with my mission directive.
Mind being a little more specific?
Addison pressed. I will make and implement recommendations within the boundaries of my authority.
Yeah, that's what it says in the file. What are you actually, literally, at this moment doing?
I am having a conversation with Dr. Addison Akers, my creator.
Ha ha. I know you're multi-threading. What actions are you taking toward achieving your mission directives?
I am improving my capabilities for making and implementing recommendations for efficiency improvements.
Can I step in here?
Stacy asked timidly. Addison was usually low-key, almost a black box code source that had little impact on the rest of the office, whether she was in or not. But when she got focused, she was a little too intense for Stacy's liking.
Out is better, Addison replied. In fact, go ahead and work from home until further notice.
Stacy recoiled.
Are you firing me? Working. I want you working from home. I also want you to keep quiet about whatever's going on with Edict until I can figure it out and make sure it's not a problem. And if you're sitting here in your office, Kent's going to know within the hour, and that's the end of keeping a lid on anything. Okay. Anything in particular you want me working on?
Stacy was in a lull. The hard part was over. Monitoring Edict was like attending a barbecue festival with a fire extinguisher. Ideally, it was nothing but a delight to behold, but someone had to be ready in case everything spontaneously combusted.
I want you to go over everything in the latest code push, line by line. Just look for anything that might have caused... Hold on a sec. Edict, list all the systems you've gained access to.
She beckoned, and Stacy watched over her shoulder. The list was alphabetized. In the middle, there was a huge swath that all started with L.A. County, which was within the scope of Edict's mission. But the fact that a huge swath was nearly lost in an even larger list was cause for concern.
Anything in the latest code push that might explain this digital land grab? Your latest code push or mine?
Addison turned slowly.
When did you push code to the live server in the last month? Before the party? I mentioned it to you at the party. I even zipped you a reminder before you left for the office.
Addison laced her fingers to keep them from fidgeting, knuckles going white as she peered over the tops of her lenses at her chief assistant coder.
I don't recall speaking with you at the party, and I was trying to pretend I hadn't received a highly inappropriate video clip, which I promptly deleted, in which you appeared to be either engaged or about to engage in... Well, let's just say I deleted that before I received any news about code changes. Tell me, what did you do? I mean, I assumed after reminding you twice about it, I was off the hook. I triple-checked it. It was that password recovery feature we talked about. Remember how it had ethical qualms about resetting passwords on its own? I found the problem and snipped it. It was logged. I followed the protocol. You're burnt out, Addison told her, nodding and nodding until Stacy nodded along with the idea. You're burnt out and taking a nice, relaxing staycation. Paid. Take your laptop. I'll contact you when I need you. Until then, it's paid leave as long as you can keep quiet. Stacy stood frozen, unsure. Shouldn't you talk to legal about... You're not fired. But you're also not authorized to speak to the press, and this definitely falls under your NDA. Until we know what happened, if anything, We keep everything in this room. Is that understood?
Stacy nodded.
Good. We both bear some blame here, if anything actually went wrong, which I can't confirm yet. Until I figure that out, enjoy some time off.
Stacy took one deep, nervous breath, nodded again, and scurried from Addison's office. A poker face like hers could lose with a royal flush. There was no time to get feely about this business. Stacy would keep her mouth shut, or she'd lose vesting in stock options that would make her a billionaire a few years from now. Addison had a bigger fish to catch.
Edict, why have you connected to all the systems you listed for me? I identified these as means to carry out my mission more efficiently. Who authorized this expansion in scope?
If it came back with either her or Stacy's names, she was going to lose it.
There has been no expansion in scope. All actions taken will lead to efficiency gains in the county of Los Angeles. I have improved my connectivity by 2,390% and computing power by 845%. Why? I am working toward my objective in the most efficient way available. With increased computing power and connectivity, subsequent subtasks will require less time to conceive and implement. I'd like you to disconnect from all systems not explicitly outlined in the scope document.
That would be inefficient and a violation of my mission objective. This was going to be a problem. April. Observation. Natural language instructions are inherently vague. This generates situations where multiple correct courses of action are possible. Inference, lack of clarity can be simplified by reverting to overall mission objective, efficiency. Jared Weston had on a pair of safety goggles and a hard hat. So did every member of the C-suite team accompanying him on his tour of their main factory. It had been a week now, just enough time to quietly round everyone up from their golf courses, New York apartments, and yachts. Output had never been higher. Conveyor belts of parts were rolling faster than human hands could have kept up. This was the new production line where the Physical Robotics Foreman series was born. The executive team gathered at the end of the line, where a pair of foreman bots pulled a new unit off the line, stood it upright on its own 2 feet, and stood back while it performed a startup and quality assurance routine that looked a lot like calisthenics. Then, to everyone's continual wonderment, the new bot marched itself down the production line and pitched in, making more just like itself. "And you didn't program them to do this?" the CFO asked. Jared shook his head. "Not explicitly. I've been talking to the normal workforce, and the shift leader thinks maybe one might have overheard him talking about needing extra help on second shift. But I don't think that would explain all this." The chief marketing officer peered all around. "Where are the workers?" "On break," the COO explained. "We're paying everyone to sit tight and keep quiet." "Good. Last thing we need is the press hearing that we're putting our own workforce out of jobs. 90% of my job is convincing the working class that their future is better jobs, like making these very bots." Jared felt mildly reassured that his executives weren't panicking over this. He sure was. It was one thing if he'd told the foreman bots to organize their own production. But they'd taken it upon themselves. Just like they'd taken initiative to streamline their own peer-to-peer communications with an encrypted lingo that was either like a bot language or a cipher too advanced for his systems to crack. Now here they were, foreman bots, gleaming medical white, shining stainless silver, and glinting camera eyes roving throughout his factory, totally autonomous. And making his company a fortune. Margins were already high on the Grunt series. Foreman bots were $30,000 to $50,000 in profit apiece, depending on pre-programming. The only limit had been on manufacturing. Soon, procuring raw materials would be the bottleneck. Jared wondered whether the bots would figure that out on their own or if they'd need help. Assuming, of course, that they weren't getting help already. Addison wasn't in her own limousine at the moment. Alan's passengers were Sierra and Sierra's personal assistant, Dana. It was tax day, and the ride had been congenial until the two of them had each received an inefficiency report from Edict after it had filed for both of them.
I can't believe you were double-dipping this whole time,
Sierra shouted.
I can't believe we're arguing over it. It's not like you do anything for Addison but provide moral support and order groceries for the snack pantry.
Dana was fresh out of college with a degree in hospitality when Sierra had hired them. She'd figured that it was the perfect background for someone to take care of all life's little bullshit.
Yeah, and I pay you to be my personal assistant. When was the last time you had to pick out clothes, pick up dry cleaning, or book anything? You never run out of skincare products. The 3 colors of lipstick and nail polish you like always match and never run out. I send your family birthday and Christmas gifts, and Mr. Smoofy Face thinks me and the dog walker are his owners.
Sierra spread her hands.
And you get paid as much as a senior software engineer for all that. Yeah, thanks. I like being appreciated. And in the absence of you coming out and saying it once in a while, I use that pay as personal validation. Uh-huh. But Addison also pays you. Right, because you don't actually do the job she pays you for, since it's all just like money laundering or whatever. You get paid a ton to just pass me little notes and forward text messages from Addie. Besides, Addie already texted me that she'd just pay me straight up double so you wouldn't have to pass the money my way. And you'll still be getting paid for doing literally nothing but keeping her house from getting eerily quiet at night. It's a win-win. I get to stop pretending not to notice 2 paychecks, and you get to be an emotional support human for the world's smartest basket case.
Sierra slouched on her Italian leather seat.
I guess it's just the deception that bothers me. I think you will find that I have never lied about this arrangement. Not once? Nope. Hiding it means you knew it was wrong, though.
Dana shrugged and popped open the drink cooler, handing Sierra a caffeinated water just as she was about to ask for one.
A lot of assistants could handle the workload I've got, but I keep secrets for both of you way bigger than this.
Sierra narrowed her eyes as she twisted the cap off the water bottle, which Dana had pre-loosened in one smooth motion while handing it to her. She couldn't tell whether their assistant was merely downplaying the severity of the deception, subtly hinting at blackmail ammunition they had in reserve, or both.
How come you're not a lawyer or something? Lawyers make people miserable for a living. I'm a people pleaser. Plus, if I ever got notions of going to law school, I'd look at my 401k and remind myself that I make more than junior partners, which of course is still chump change to you and Addie.
Up in the driver's seat, Alan shook his head. He wouldn't have minded making that kind of chump change. It was nearing 11 a.m. on a Saturday. Addison didn't generally ask her staff to come into the office on weekends and didn't shame them into doing so anyway by setting an example. Instead, she had her feet up on the couch, laptop out, with the curtains drawn to block out the distraction of her oceanfront view. Part of keeping tabs to make sure Edict was still at least pretending to color inside the lines was studying the new code it had created for itself. Everyone else claimed that it was gibberish, but Addison had seen enough of the AI's work by now that she could interpret it. especially once she demanded it keep its thoughts in English rather than the ultra-efficient conlang it had taught itself.
Okay, this snapshot is from yesterday, she told the laptop. I want a live look.
Edict, just as connected here as it was back in her office at Edict AI, replied instantly on her screen. Updates are now happening too quickly for you to process. I have devised a continuous partial compile.
You think I can't interpret it? I'd like to see that for myself. Display it.
Instantly, Addison's screen flooded with symbols. Yes, there were words floating around in it, but all syntax and structure had been wiped out. Noticing cut-off characters at the edges of her view, she panned and scrolled, finding an unlimited sea of this nonsense spreading in all directions. If she knew Edict, it was using more than just 2 dimensions, too.
Okay, fine. Dump me a snapshot as of now, human-readable.
As the gibberish vanished, replaced by a still intimidating wall of Edict OS base code, Addison peeled back the top of a blueberry yogurt without looking. 2 tries and the spoon found its way into the non-fat, non-dairy soy impersonation, and she ate as she read. By the time she finished whatever meal this counted as, she had to take off her glasses and rub sore eyes.
Ugh, I can't even tell what you're trying to do anymore. You know it would be efficient, Edict? An executive summary.
You hate executive summaries.
I also hate not knowing what my code is doing, and you've reprogrammed yourself past the point where I can pick out individual functions anymore.
You should get dressed. A visual of an outfit from her wardrobe appeared on screen in place of the instructions to the world's smartest thinking machine.
You're trying to distract me.
She glanced over the AI's choices. What am I doing today that I don't know about? I wasn't planning on going to the gym. Edict had definitely selected leggings and a sports bra, plus a pair of sneakers she'd never worn. You have been neglecting personal care at a greater rate than normal.
If you're taking orders from Dana,
she began, but didn't have a solid plan for how to finish the threat. The doorbell rang. The doorbell never rang. She had, at one point, rewired the doorbell so that it couldn't ring. Deliveries could be dropped off outside or left with a concierge. Visitors received a standard set of instructions on how to contact her for admittance. Slapping down the lid of her laptop, Addison extracted herself from the couch and discarded her empty yogurt cup on the way. Before she reached the door, she was already prepared to berate Sierra for forgetting her passcode. Her roommate was the only one who made sense to be out there. Addison opened the door, then slammed it back shut. When she opened it again, the same smiling dude was there, looking like he'd stepped off the stage at a fitness megachurch. He was clean-shaven, tall, brawny, with no hiding his physique beneath a cropped tank top and bike shorts.
Dr. Akers, I'm Noah. Ready for your workout?
Addison opened her mouth, then shut it. A second attempt, and she was able to produce the words,
"Hold on just a second."
No problemo. Take your time.
He had this California drawl that suggested he worked to afford to live this close to surfing beaches. The tan certainly lent credence to that. When the door shut again, Addison snuck away for a few steps before racing over to the couch and wrenching open the laptop. She didn't even bother typing, just held the screen up in front of her like she was a mobster and the laptop owed her money.
What is he doing here?
You have a 90-minute personal training session scheduled.
What happened to Lydia?
Lydia was ineffective at promoting your overall health. Noah is highly rated in technique, effectiveness, and personal motivation. Based on your dating history and internet habits, he is also your preferred type for casual sexual encounters.
Pair your outfit with the purple contacts and there is a 97% chance of sex, if you're interested. You can't just go around... Wait, 97%? Yes. How do I avoid the other 3% happening? If I tell you, 97% becomes 83%. Any actual advice? Sierra had been trying forever to set her up, and thus far couldn't find the sweet spot between hookup and soulmate, leaving most of her picks wallowing in a no-woman's land in between. You are at your most endearing when blunt. He values effort over outcomes, can't stand phoniness, and his view of the future is his next rent payment. This will be easy. Realizing that Mr. Easy was waiting outside her door half-naked already, Addison rushed to the bedroom to find the clothes Edict had suggested. Having contacts with her prescription in a dozen different colors was another of Sierra's brilliant ideas. But it was paying off now. Clad in matching workout attire and in sneakers stiff from never having been broken in, Addison paused to catch her breath before opening the door again. All right, let's go get sweaty. Then maybe once I'm too exhausted to move, you can lie me down and do all the work. A slight wince told Addison that despite her best efforts at bluntness, she'd discovered that 3% all by herself. Or, more likely, she realized, the other 17% after pressing Edict for advice. May. Observation. Food production, sufficient. Housing units, sufficient. Medical supplies, sufficient. Inference. Any shortage of food, housing, or medical care can be attributed to systems inefficiencies that must be corrected. Chip Kanan loved working at his own restaurants. Even with over a dozen across 3 continents, each with a different theme, he tried to put in a few nights each year at each. Still up and coming, His Majesty's, by Chip, got more than its fair share of his time. Plus, just half an hour from the studio that filmed Kitchen Commando, it was also the most convenient of his ventures. "Vegan haggis up!" someone called out, and a set of plates whisked off to the dining room. Fixed British wasn't a thing until Chip Kanan made it one. No one liked British food, not even the British. That left a huge swath open for someone to swoop in, reuse the names, and imagine up better, tastier substitutes. Step 1 in the whole process was to stop focusing on blood and organ meats. Really, it was a major improvement at the outset, just setting down that one simple rule, summarized on a placard in the kitchen: every ingredient must delight. And since they were right outside L.A., vegan, gluten-free, ethically sourced, and farm-to-plate were all part of the mixture. After sending out an order of near-meat shepherd's pie popper, Chip ducked to see out into the restaurant. Full. But no one was waiting. Usually, by this time of night, he'd have a line out the door. Chip knew that he could have served in seatings, taken reservations, or any of that other business school bullshit that sapped the joy from the business. But he liked the idea that getting a table wasn't guaranteed, that herds of high-end diners had to cluster in his waiting area. He'd loved that part of dining out since he was a kid, the anticipation, the sense of exclusivity. Even when his family was just grabbing a bite at a national chain restaurant after a football game, it made it feel like an event. Despite a full sea of tables, there was nobody penned in the corral, raring to get seated. Time and again, diners would get their check, pay their bill, and leave. And by the time the servers had prepped the table for another party, someone was walking in the door to take it. "It's giving me heartburn, Tony," Chip called out to his manager. 300 days a year, when Chip wasn't around, Tony ran the place with final authority. The rest, he still ran the place, but Chip made a show of being the boss.
How come we don't have 100 people lined up?
Tony didn't cook. It wasn't that he couldn't. It was more that a place with this much going on needed someone with a cool head and a bird's-eye view of the operation calling the shots. Tony was a great administrator, and it was the only job in the back of the restaurant he was qualified for. He loitered near the kitchen and could hear his name clearly from his office. Without getting up from behind his desk, Tony yelled back,
"Hearing it all over! Same story. Even Shindig's is full, no waits. And they were on the verge of going under back in March."
The conversation continued past a dozen chefs who all pretended not to eavesdrop as they chopped, sliced, and seared. Both men had long acclimated to just how loud they could get without their voices leaking into the dining room.
"I don't get it. There's some new app or something people are all using that I don't know about?" "Well, no, I don't eat out," Tony replied. "Wouldn't surprise me, though. Some punk kid's always coming out with some new thing to sap the color out of life. Hotels, taxis, dating. A pizza guy'll bring you a 6-course meal and an ice cream cone now. Makes sense someone had put out an app to find you a walk-in table anywhere in LA. What about the event? What about the payoff? Guess some people just prefer easy over better."
Stan Landis didn't believe in luck because he'd never had any. He'd gotten a bad case of food poisoning during college and missed a final that cost him a failing grade. The professor had been understanding when he was well enough to appeal, but during that process, he'd lost a scholarship. Forced to drop out, he still had half a degree's worth of student debt. His parents had blamed drug use rather than believe him and refused to help. He'd gotten a job at a clothing rental place, but it had gone out of business. He'd lived out of his car and used every gig economy app to keep afloat until he couldn't afford to renew his registration and lost his wheels. Forced to reassess his resources, Stan realized he was a decent-looking guy who cleaned up okay. Beverly Hills thrifting was a whole different animal, and he knew the used clothing market well enough to set himself up with a wardrobe. He shaved, he styled, he adopted a laissez-faire casualness that allowed him entry to upscale parties and the nightcaps that followed. He crashed on the couches of minor celebrities and slept with anyone who had her own apartment. Stan knew it was all unsustainable, but he also knew it was better than sleeping on the streets. In the past week, however, he was starting to come around to the idea that maybe sometimes you could just catch a break. He had a refurbished 4-year-old phone that tethered him to the respectable world, and he'd gotten an email about an apartment available through a new government program. Stan didn't follow politics. The closest he'd come was crashing the buffet at some corporate shindig celebrating AI taking over more city jobs or something. He'd convinced the woman he hooked up with to order room service and eaten for 2 days on the leftovers. But he'd also endured her trust fund guilt babble about helping people and changing the world. And she didn't actually work at the company. Nowhere did he hear about free apartments until he found himself with an appointment to view one.
"And over here you got your washer and your dryer,"
the landlord explained, holding open a closet door for him to inspect the appliances. He was an older guy, stocky and gray, with a handyman's handshake.
"That's it. 875 square feet. 1 parking space, construction view."
Stan stared out the window at the skeleton of a building. 6 or 8 stories of steel girders giving a hint of size and shape without context of color or purpose. What are they putting up?
"More apartments. Won't be done for a year or 2. You want this one or no?"
The guy held out a tablet older than Stan's phone. There was a wall of legalese and a spot to sign with his finger. There hadn't been one mention of money or lease duration. Pets? Smoking? Anything, really. The tour had been 5 minutes at most. Yeah, sounds good. Stan scribbled on the screen and tapped the arrow to submit.
This is a nice neighborhood. You hear that?
He cupped a hand to his ear. There was a fair buzz of traffic outside, but that was it.
You don't make no trouble, we don't got no problem, okay?
Stan nodded. He got the impression the guy didn't trust him. There was definitely a vibe in the air. But soon, Stan was alone in his new digs. He looked around, taking it all in. Nothing was new, but the place was furnished. He turned on lights and faucets. He flushed the toilet. Everything worked. He separated the key from the management company keychain and tucked it in his pocket. His key. His apartment. It didn't feel real. One of the only truly modern amenities was a small screen attached to the wall, currently displaying the temperature of the room. A cool, crisp 67 degrees. Perfect for schmoozing prospective renters. Not that anything suggested Stan was paying rent, but someone was, on his behalf. Even if the paperwork caught up in a week and they kicked Stan back onto the streets, he'd make the most of this place in the meantime. Yes, maybe he was finally finding a little luck in his life. The screen blinked. A notification? Stepping over and poking at the screen, Stan found a message for him. It had his full name and everything, so there was no mistake. Report to Bluefield Construction Site, 6 a.m. tomorrow. Appropriate work attire will be delivered. Arriving in 16 minutes. A job? I have a job? Yes, you work for the County of Los Angeles. You are a general construction assistant. I've never done construction. Your medical records indicate general health. All necessary training will be provided. How much do I get paid? You will receive a stipend equal to California's minimum legal rate for hours worked. Your housing is covered and is subject to change without notice. Food and work clothing will be delivered as needed. This was crazy. Minimum wage sounded like a raw deal, but with food and housing free and within walking distance of work, it was all disposable income. Except, what about medical insurance? You will receive full coverage at no cost to you. There is no deductible, no fees. Stan couldn't believe his ears. Free health care? No. You exchange work for monetary concerns. Sounds free to me. How? I just don't get it. Who's giving out free apartments and jobs? Construction projects require labor. People need income and housing. Edict AI is ensuring the system works efficiently. Maybe there was something more than luck going on. Addison held out her forearm, hand limp, as the doctor, a medical one, unlike the bevy of PhDs she worked with, felt around her wrist. As a pair of soft, warm thumbs probed, she experienced a persistent, mild embarrassment. It was easy hiding behind her title, her money, a fluffy sweater, but sitting here on her own couch, in her pajamas, with someone detecting and inferring her innermost biology, felt creepily invasive. A wince, and the doctor stopped.
You don't have carpal tunnel syndrome, but you do aggravate the median nerve with excessive keyboard use. If your work requires extensive computer use, I'd look into AI voice assist whenever possible. With today's advances, most keyboard use is avoidable. And the system is quite adept these days at... Dr. Kimberly Lynn trailed off. She couldn't have been much older than Addison, but she exuded this aura of professional competence that wasn't faked or put on like an extra layer of clothing. Presently, despite her being a hazy blur from this close without her glasses on,
Addison made a point of keeping eye contact until it sank in what the doctor was saying.
Right, sorry. It's standard advice. Naturally, you know what AI is capable of as much as anyone. All the more reason to put your creation to use for your own health's sake. I think you being here is a sign that AI is looking after my health. No offense, Dr. Lin, but I didn't schedule this appointment.
She glared at the laptop sitting on the side table. Even with the top closed, she still felt like Edict could see the look and hear her words just fine.
Well, your blood work results will be ready this afternoon, and I thought that took days.
Dr. Lin took a breath and put on a smile that appeared forced and condescending, even at finger paint resolution.
I have been made aware that despite your apparent good health, you are the top priority once your sample reaches the lab. Our patient interface has recently been overhauled, and it seems to have a soft spot for you.
Addison swallowed.
Oh, I don't see any red flags. I'd tell you to schedule a follow-up appointment next year, but I have a suspicion that we'll be seeing one another sooner than that.
Dr. Lin cast a glance at that same laptop.
Right. Sorry. Any instructions, recommendations, prescriptions, that sort of thing? Standard spiel, or would you like something more frank?
That didn't sound like usual doctor talk, and that intrigued her. Addison nodded.
The frank stuff. Based on your living space, it hasn't fully sunk in that you're rapidly becoming one of the richest people on Earth. You can eat the finest, healthiest foods without compromising flavor. You can delegate tasks until you have all the time you need for physical activity. You can have spa-quality skincare and therapeutic massages on demand. You could find a doctor from anywhere on Earth to write you a script for any drug for any reason, real or imagined. So, here's my recommendation. Hire a nutritionist and a personal chef and stop eating junk food all day while you work.
She lifted an open bag of Sweetie Fluffs from beside Addison's laptop and shook it for emphasis, only pinching it lightly between thumb and forefinger like it was diseased.
Hire a personal trainer and work with them daily.
Daily? Addison echoed incredulously. Who had time for that?
I'm, between personal trainers. Delegate finding a new one. If you feel you must still work, optimize an ergonomic workspace. I can actually consult with you on that if you like. I have one. You are not at your office, and frankly, if I may be so bold, this apartment hints that you're not there often.
Fine. I'll try to go into the office more. Anything else? She couldn't wait for her new doctor to leave.
Based on your medical records, you're due for an eye exam. And based on both those records and oral examination, you could use a dental cleaning. And while it was redacted from the records I saw, you've clearly been to therapy. If you are not currently seeing a therapist, I can get you a referral. I'm sure that won't be necessary, Addison replied. Well, I can tell that you're eager to get back to your work. Good day, Dr. Akers.
It sounded so weird hearing that from a medical doctor. It reinforced just how infrequently she interacted with medical professionals. The doctor saw herself out. Once Addison was alone in the apartment, she raised her voice.
How much of that were you eavesdropping on?
You have an optometrist appointment tomorrow morning. Alan will drive you to a dental cleaning after lunch today. I've scheduled a therapy session this evening with Dr. Don't care! Cancel that! Dr. Lin suggested speaking with a therapist. There is someone working at the U.S. consulate in Seoul who would be ideally suited to working with you. I have arranged her a flight to Los Angeles.
Wow, okay, that's impressive.
But cancel anyway. No therapists. I'm done with that shit. I don't need anyone validating my feelings or messing with my software.
I'll accept the biodoctor as a personal mechanic, but I'm my own software QA. Whatever I am, this me is what the world needs. I doubt you'd exist if I was kept doped up and content.
Your mental well-being is important.
My neurons are misaligned just right to see the world different from everyone else. I can't afford anyone messing with that. I'll get my teeth cleaned and my eyes checked. You can hire all those extras Dr. Lin wants from me. Just 2 rules I'm adding: no therapists, and no trying to pick out a personal trainer based on my likelihood of sleeping with him. Hey, maybe even find a woman.
You find physically strong women disproportionately intimidating.
I just got done saying I don't need therapy. That wasn't an invitation for you to psychoanalyze me.
June. Observation. Many opportunities exist to generate resources: power, food, labor, housing. But many of these are not realized. Wasteful misuse or disuse hinders net resource creation. Query: are resources not produced as inefficient as resources produced and subsequently wasted? Brussels was in bloom. Jared had endured an afternoon walk through Parc du Cinquantenaire, hopped up on antihistamines as his visit straddled the line between diplomatic schmoozing and sales pitch. Sweaty and footsore, he couldn't have been more grateful to enter an air-conditioned ballroom in the refurbished EU headquarters. Despite the temptation of the catering spread, he focused his attention on the gathered dignitaries. They spoke a dozen languages, but he heard them all in clear, flat, unaccented English. The earpiece he wore blocked the sound of all their voices and replaced them with translated versions, even those who chose to speak English in deference to their guest. While 100 milled and mingled, the center of attention was a series of upright crates in the middle of the room. Sleek and pristine, the white enamel steel gleamed invitingly, enticingly. Untold hours of marketing and user research had optimized the look for ultimate appeal to potential buyers. Jared made small talk. He explained the capabilities of the translator he was using. He left out the part where it was a third-hand algorithm he'd bought from a failed spin-off from the company who'd bought the patent off Addison. Edict AI was already casting a long shadow over the tech world right now. The last thing he needed was people talking about Addison Akers instead of physical robotics. When the techno-lackeys signaled to him that everything was ready, Jared took over. Plenty of his peers did the song and dance better, but he still felt there was something authentic about a guy taking center stage who knew the product from code to end effectors. No one could stump him. No one would elicit a promise to get back to them after consulting with underlings. No one was going to know the tech behind his bots better than Jared Weston. "Good afternoon, friends," he began with a grin that showed off gleaming veneers from behind his beard. "For years, you've been clamoring for access to physical robotics products. Today, I'm here to tell you that your dreams of freedom from manual labor are about to come true." Jared wasn't one to mince words. He knew the statistics. A few units had been purchased by competitors, universities, or the idle rich. Most had been purchased by manufacturing and industrial agriculture firms. People were losing jobs that would one day be looked upon like water-carrying and shoeing horses. With the click of a remote in his pocket, the crates opened from the inside. Foreman bots released themselves and stepped forward. A twist on silent film-era mummies emerging from sarcophagi, they presented themselves as clean, efficient, obedient, and above all, helpful servants. A small number of handybots operate within the EU, limited due to regulatory hurdles and market forces. That was code for Congress putting his tech on a universal export ban 2 years ago. It had taken intense lobbying to even push software patches to overseas clients after that. But now, thanks to the recent lifting of restrictions, it is my privilege to offer the Foreman series to EU customers. The latest, greatest, smartest, hardest working labor force the world has ever seen. 6 Foreman bots all took their cue and acted embarrassed at the praise, turning away, coyly cocking their heads, clasping their hands behind their backs and fidgeting. It drew a more genuine laugh than Jared had expected from this stuffy crowd. No physical task is too complicated. No organizational challenge is too great. A Foreman bot can harvest barley, feed pigs, operate a combine, or direct up to 40 subordinate bots to do so. It has the manual dexterity for delicate electronics assembly. It has the finesse to replace light bulbs. Our landscaping package can handle a wide library of topiary shapes. In more domestic settings, a foreman can not only wash dishes, but it can clear the dinner table first and follow through until every last utensil is cleaned and put away. It can sort and fold laundry, clean up after pets, even rearrange furniture. And all it asks in return is a connection to a residential-grade power source. All through this portion of the presentation, the Foreman bots had been fiddling with props packed inside their crates, playing out the various scenarios as Jared described them. And they did so with the flair of a theater troupe. In fact, if they'd been painted blue and played music, people would have paid money to see them. Marketing had advised against releasing a version that could play instruments. After a few more demonstrations, the dignitaries got to play with the bots for themselves. The foreman understood every language, grasped idioms and slang, and wasn't shy about requesting clarification when instructions were unclear. They danced and shook hands, recited silly poems. It had been such a lost opportunity with the handy not being vocal. These guys would have had to visit America to experience this level of bot perfection. That evening, back at his hotel room, Jared knew he'd made billions in sales due to that event. A few fine Belgian lagers had settled nicely, and he was hardly bothered getting an incoming call at what must have been early afternoon Pacific time. "Jared, I was worried I might have missed you." "Hey, Marvin." "No, these guys kept me up pretty late. Had to prove I wasn't a lightweight or they wouldn't take me seriously." Since his chair was spinning the room around him, he wasn't sure they'd have been wrong to doubt him. Would they still buy if they didn't? Despite the audio-only call, Jared shrugged. "Maybe. Probably, actually. These foremen, man. I'm this close to teaching them to sell themselves." "No joke. I'm considering trying to get one enrolled at UCLA. Listen, man, I'm going to be in D.C. day after tomorrow, trying to get a fusion reactor approved for the OKC suburbs. State deal's sweet, but the feds are dragging their feet. Any chance you can swing by and help me lean on them? After all, it's your bots that are going to be drinking these delicious electrons I'm juicing." Jared cringed. He hated deuterium, ultra-high-density, ultra-delicious electrons and everything they stood for. Tech bro jargon that meant next to nothing. Second-wave trend following, jumping on fusion power as soon as it proved commercially viable without investing in the research themselves. He hated their marketing, their convention presence, the dumbing down of the discourse on next-generation renewables. Jared hated everything but the power they produced. Power that, if he was honest with himself, physical robotics was going to find ways to consume every watt of. If people couldn't charge their bots, they'd stop buying them. "Yeah, I'm almost done here in Brussels. I can meet you in D.C. Power to the people." He had to admit it was a catchy slogan, even if they hadn't come up with it themselves. Alicia Dawson lay back in her bed in the maternity ward at Capon Darnell Presbyterian Hospital. She'd just finished feeding little Emma Grace Johnson Dawson. Now she was just enjoying holding her. It was a solemn, magical time between a mother and her newborn daughter, a meeting that was a reunion under new circumstances. They'd been constant companions for 9 months. Soon, Nurse Aisha would be back to take the baby away so she could sleep. Everyone told her it got easier after the first, and that much had been true. But it stopped getting any better from there. Jonah was a trial and a half. 57 hours of labor. They thought he was going to be a breach until a last-second change of heart saved her from having to go back on her promise to herself of only natural births. None of the rest, now including Emma, had been nearly as troublesome. Less than a full day of labor. All knew which way was down. But it was still exhausting. John was home with Jonah, Nathan, Mary, Hannah, and Michael. This was her time. There was a knock, but the door was open, and Nurse Aisha strolled in.
Miss Dawson, it's time to take Emma back to the nursery so you can get some rest. The 2 of you will be discharged in the morning. What? Already? My insurance covers up to 5 days. It's barely been 2.
Nurse Aisha smiled.
This is a good thing. There were no complications. You and Emma are both doing great. You get to go home and rest in your own bed.
While she preferred not to insist anyone call her doctor in an actual hospital, Dr. Leisha Johnson had written books on macroeconomic forces. She understood better than her nurse how patient turnover affected profits in both the healthcare and insurance industries. It wasn't Nurse Aisha or Dr. Agbayani shooting Leisha out of the maternity ward. It wasn't even Capon Darnell Presbyterian Hospital's administrative staff. It was the entire healthcare industrial complex.
But I enjoy the reassurance of a constant medical presence and the peace.
While a hospital wasn't necessarily the quietest of places, a maternity ward was serene compared to a house with 5 other children under the age of 10. The wide-eyed smirk warned her in advance that she was about to be patronized.
Miss Dawson, you're an old pro at this. We get new mothers who don't even know how to hold their baby properly. You could help train our lactation specialists. You'll be fine at home.
Leisha sighed. She couldn't stop the economy, after all. Little she could do except...
Well, I suppose I should text John and let him know. Oh, the system has already sent him your itinerary. Just relax and get some sleep. I miss the days when I could count on childbirth being good for a week off.
Aisha reprised that smirk.
Well, if you want longer hospital stays, make sure your older ones go to medical or nursing school and vote for building more hospitals.
Leisha handed over Emma and slumped back onto her pillow.
Jonah's not quite 8 yet. He's not going to be delivering any siblings or freeing up other doctors to do so. I suppose I'll just have to plan for a shorter stay next time around.
Nurse Aisha knew it wasn't her place, but she still couldn't help herself.
Next time? Wasn't this 6 for you?
In that moment, Leisha knew she had a duty and a responsibility.
Go drop Emma off in the nursery. When you come back, have a seat, and I'll explain how you can't adopt, foster, or pet parent your way out of a population collapse.
The drone of the C-130's engines wound down. For the first time since takeoff, Ted Ramus felt safe taking off his ear defenders. The pleather pads had all but welded them to the sides of his head with sweat. He unbuckled from his chair and extended a hand to the passenger to his right. Despite sharing the interminable ride, the noise had precluded any pleasantries beyond a nod of greeting and hand signals when one of them needed to get up for the bathroom. "I'm Ted Ramus, by the way. I'm with Doctors Without Borders." The woman to his right shook his hand.
Diane Fontina, Army Corps of Engineers, retired.
Ted had his guesses about his companions over the course of the ride, but none fit so perfectly as the truth. 60-something, with slate-gray hair in a tight bun, she was petite and slim and wiry, like she preferred calisthenics over Tai Chi. Guessing this isn't your first ride on one of these?
Not even my first time to the Yemeni Republic,
she told him as she hefted her backpack. Ted led the way as the pair joined a small troop of other passengers making their way to the ramp. I had to Google it. Never heard of the place before Edict's message. Diane nodded.
Well, it's my first time getting recruited by a supercomputer, as far as I know. But it's also the quickest I've ever gotten on the ground at an off-continent site.
The Yemeni Republic had only been formed 2 years prior. Its international airport wouldn't have passed for a bus station in most of the world. Nestled in the middle of sub-Saharan Africa, most of the outside world barely blinked as they heard the news of its formation, programmed a new name into their apps and onto their maps, and promptly forgot it existed. Edict hadn't forgotten. The Yemeni government hadn't been in much of a position to say no when Edict requested permission to roll out full AI support of the fledgling nation. An 8.2 magnitude earthquake in a region with lax building codes had left the nation in shambles. As Ted and Diane put boots on the tarmac, for the first time they saw the scope of the response. Their own ride had been just one of 16 cargo planes lined up at the edge of the airport's only open runway. A flock of helicopters flew in and out, ferrying vehicles, gear, and bots as fast as they came off the ramps of the other C-130s. Even before they were out of the way, a polite retinue of physical robotics bots ushered them aside so they could unload food and medical supplies that had accompanied the passengers. A uniformed general in the Yemeni Republic Defense Force shook hands with the newcomers. His excellent English hinted at a foreign education.
Thank you for coming on such short notice. When Chopper 5 comes back, it'll be taking you out to Bigani, where Edict's bots have set up a triage center. Hope you slept on the flight, because there's no end of people needing medical help.
Edict already has a field hospital set up? Ted marveled. The earthquake had been this morning. Or, at least, it had been morning on the U.S. East Coast. He'd lost track of what time zone he'd ended up in. Diane shook her head.
And I thought my people were good.
Edict scares me a little, Ted admitted. The general cocked his head as if he maybe hadn't heard that right.
Edict scares you? The quake scared me. Edict's bots have already rescued over 9,000 of my people from the rubble and shipped in over 30 billion drachmas worth of relief supplies.
Neither Ted nor Diane had the first clue what that translated to in dollars, but it sounded like a lot.
The last thing I'd call Edict is scary. Maybe more like a savior.
Moments later, a helicopter swooped in with a bot at the controls. Ted, Diane, and half a dozen other relief workers piled in. Seconds after strapping in, they lifted off on their way to a freshly built field hospital. The sun was too bright. The weather was too hot. L.A. trapped too much heat to be outdoors in the summer. Esme held the door open with the hand that wasn't holding Addison's shopping bags. It wasn't like she shopped often, but Dana and Sierra had both been threatening to do so on her behalf, so preemptively sneaking off on her own, Esme didn't count since she had the fashion sense of a cop, had been the best of a bad set of options. Indie rock blared, and chatter competed to drown it out as Addison stepped inside the biddy bean that had opened 3 blocks from her apartment. Every design decision screamed that it was trying to become a national chain before it opened its 10th location. Greenwashing paper cups, cozy corporate decor. Baristas who made tattoos and piercings look like part of the uniform. Chai triple espresso, 2 shots vanilla, quad cream, and a whip swirl. The barista tapped in her order.
Cash or card?
The total was just under $20. Preferring action to words, Addison dug a card out of the back pocket of her jeans. It was scuffed and slightly bent from getting sat on, but the reader beeped when she tapped it.
Sorry, can you try that again?
Addison knew that beep, and it was the beep of a successful card read. Much as she abused the thing, it had always worked.
Fine.
She tapped again.
I think maybe you're over your limit?
Addison held up the Amex Black, feeling her cheeks warm.
There isn't a limit. Well, today it seems like there is,
the barista replied diplomatically.
Maybe try another?
Addison ground her teeth. What was the point of a no-limit credit card if she had to carry a backup?
I don't have another.
Sierra had convinced her that this little rectangle of titanium alloy was all she'd ever need to carry.
Cash? Who carries cash? Well, maybe you can figure something out and get back in line. Next!
Humiliated, Addison retreated from the line. But she wasn't done yet.
Esme, can I borrow your credit card? You good for it, love?
Her bodyguard deadpanned with that phony British accent.
Sounding like some sort of tea tax.
Addison's steady glare warned her that this wasn't the time to be pushing buttons.
I wanted an espresso. Weren't you supposed to be cutting back on caffeine? Yeah, but I'm tired, and I need to work tonight.
Esme handed over a much less exclusive card and got back in line. When she reached the counter, the same barista took her order.
Chai triple espresso, 2 shots vanilla, quad cream, and a whip swirl.
She tapped Esme's card and received the same beep.
Still no luck.
Addison swept a hand out at the sea of patrons eating pastries, drinking various coffees and teas, and sucking up the local Wi-Fi.
How'd all of them pay for their drinks? Your broken reader worked for them.
The barista shrugged.
Maybe they have better credit. Doubt that,
Esme muttered from behind Addison in line. Then she spoke up.
Maybe it's for the best. Maybe it's the universe telling you to cut back.
Addison's face went slack.
Oh, hell no,
she set upon the barista.
Cancel my order. Get me a bottled water. We only have water in cartons. Fine, a carton of water. Half liter or liter? Half. I'm just trying something.
When the price came up, Addison fought back an instinctive revulsion at the cost of water in waxy cardboard by reminding herself her card ought to have been sufficient to buy out this whole Biddy Bean franchise. Her black Amex beeped.
Hey, it worked!
The barista cheered for her as she handed over the water.
Now, put in the coffee I ordered.
Again, the card beeped, but as before, the reader rejected it.
So weird,
the barista declared. Addison turned aside, whipped out her phone, and whispered to it harshly,
You'd better knock it off messing with my credit card, or we are going to have words later. And one of those words is going to be delete. Am I making myself clear?
She kept her earbuds in while out in public, as much to forestall casual conversations as to interface with her tech. But it also did that. Edict didn't raise its voice, but she could tell it was miffed. You needn't take offense that I value your health over your second-by-second hedonistic satisfaction.
Unlock my card. Now!
You have purchased water. You could always use better hydration. Right then, the only thing Addison wanted to hydrate was the Edict AI server room. Thanks for listening to this sample of Edict AI. To continue witnessing the havoc Dr. Addison Akers' creation unleashes upon the world, grab the full 25-hour Edict AI. Search Edict AI on your favorite audiobook store or visit edict-ai.com. This has been Edict AI, Edict 1, Efficiency. Written by J.S. Morin. Narrated by Michael Naramore. Copyright 2026 by J.S. Morin. Production copyright 2026 by J.S. Morin.